Attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Vaishali Jain, and I'll be your moderator today. And thank you so much for joining us here at Netcom Learning, a market leader in promoting lifelong learning, training, and talent development solutions. So we're very excited to host today's webinar on succeeding in the global workplace. And presenting today's topic is Vincent Supa. Just a little bit about Vincent. Vincent is a global HR polymath and self-described member of Generation Flux. Using his operational experience across multiple industries spanning 3 continents, he now consults, teaches at NYU, and is an active member of HR Avant-Garde. As long as HR continues to be the gatekeepers to the jobs people want, Vincent will continue to give those around him, including those attending today's webinar, the prerequisite mindset to navigate their professional world to their advantage. Now, please bear in mind that this is an overview of a very robust topic, and we offer a collection of technical and business courses that can be tailored towards your specific requirements. So if you're interested in a further discussion, you can make an appointment with our learning consultants through our website at netcomlearning.com. Also, today's session is being recorded, so you'll get free access to the recording in the next 24 hours via email. And just a little bit more about Netcom Learning's value proposition. Netcom Learning helps customers build innovative learning organizations by achieving a smarter workforce, adapting to change, and driving growth. The organization does this with a broad catalog of offerings, developing customized learning plans, and our global delivery capabilities. And since 1998, we've been empowering organizations with our managed learning services to help them reach optimal performance results and address challenges. We have 9 practice areas in which we specialize. They encompass people, process, and technology training. Today's presentation is from the business and leadership practice. And so why should you attend today's webinar? Well, every day, more organizations are capitalizing on the benefits of having employees work from home or remote locations. As a recruitment strategy, talent can be hired from anywhere, and teams should be allowed to work remotely to save the cost of operating in a physical location. Many startup organizations have teams in place that have never worked together in co-located offices. Leaders are now expecting to manage productivity, build culture, retain staff, increase loyalty, and ensure high-quality results across distances, with the increasing virtualization of the workplace. I'll just go ahead and give you a quick overview of the logistics before we get started. To start with, you have the option to adjust the window size to your liking. So simply hit the escape key and you'll find the Zoom button on the top left corner of your GoToWebinar viewer. And everyone has been muted except for our presenters, so please feel free to submit any questions you have for the presenters in the questions pane, and we'll go ahead and address them throughout the session and at the end of the session as well. And there's also a PDF copy of today's slides that are in the handout section of your GoToWebinar viewer. And I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Vincent to present today's topic. Vincent?
Thank you, Vaishali. Welcome, everyone. Today's webinar, the top 5 technology trends that will dominate 2018. Let's get started. Today's agenda, we'll be covering a couple of things. Number 1, the top 5 technology trends IT cannot afford to ignore. Next, we'll discuss cybersecurity, trends to ensure safe and efficient connections across the digital environment. Next, we'll talk about the role of cloud computing in business before we get into the future of AI in business. Then we will conclude with technology innovations for learning and development systems, and if we have time, some questions and answers with myself and Vaishali. So let's look at the top 5 technology trends that IT cannot afford to ignore. Now, this holiday season represents a time to look towards 2018 and the technology trends most pertinent for executives. But even though we continue to be in unprecedented areas of growth around cloud computing, And believe me, cloud computing is one of the top 5 things we will discuss. Other areas are also gaining steam and stand to dominate IT departments and demand executive attention in the years ahead. Now, change is the only constant. Organizations must evaluate trends and business impacts and constantly adjust technologies and processes accordingly, or else companies are at risk of losing their competitive advantages. Now, cybersecurity has certainly been in the news in 2017, almost more than any other year. Now, the increase in the number and sophistication of cyber attacks in 2017 will encourage many enterprises to introduce rigorous cybersecurity procedures for 2018. We want to both hinder the external threats and also negate the risk of insider threats, meaning people that are working within the organizations which may have intent to sabotage or harm the organizations. Now, I will say at a very high level that if I had a dollar, for every dollar to spend on cybersecurity, I would spend 70 cents on training, because most vulnerabilities is introduced by the human error in people incorrectly, inappropriately, really falling victim to phishing attacks or clicking links and whatnot. So I'm going to repeat that. They say for every dollar to spend on cybersecurity, 70 cents should go on training and development, because that really is the point of vulnerability, that people get tricked into doing something that they should not have done. So that's a very cost-effective way, because most cyber attacks start with someone clicking the wrong link or engaging with the wrong person. Now, a couple of things to look out for. Now, the GDPR, that's the General Data Protection regulations. It's a set of regulations that they're intended to strengthen and unify data protection for all individuals in the European Union. It is also used to address the export of personal data outside of the EU. So think about that. Even though GDPR is limited to the EU, in a global economy, almost every country is dealing with the EU. So in that regard, the standards of the European Union really could be setting standards to the world, except if a country or enterprise wants to ignore the EU market, which is highly improbable. Now, the GDPR also addresses the export of personal data, and it aims primarily to give control back to citizens and residents over their own personal data. And it also simplifies the regulatory environment for international businesses, and this will become enforceable on May 25th, 2018. So if you're a business and you do any transactions with the European Union, yes, you'll be affected by this, and it pays to dig a little deeper and find out what you have to do to remain in compliance. The other thing that we want to look at in cybersecurity is artificial intelligence and machine learning. Now, as artificial intelligence and machine learning gather pace, they will start to impact more and more industries, and it will also play a bigger role in cybersecurity. Now, because the battle with cyber criminals moves so quickly, it is machine learning models which show the most promise on being able to keep up with that. Machine learning models that can predict and accurately identify attacks swiftly and even before they happen. This could be the real boom for the info security industry. So in the years ahead, these models need to be trained and honed. However, right, technology is both a blessing and a curse. However, there's also a risk that the same AI machine learning meant to protect us may also be exploited by attackers. Now, the way AI machine learning is going to play a bigger role in cybersecurity is by having very complex predictive analytics that could spot zero-day threats and even predict events before they happen. And just to bring it to use a illustration from pop culture, the movie Minority Report was really about predictive analytics, right? The Tom Cruise movie with Minority Report, it was about using data analytics to predict crime before it happened. So in this vein, AI and machine learning will play a leading role in cybersecurity. The other thing that we want to look at under cybersecurity is the Internet of Things. Today, we're rolling out more and more sensor-packed internet-connected devices. What do I mean by that? Well, you could buy clothing now that has sensors in them. We have smart refrigerators that can place an order with Fresh Direct as soon as you run out of milk. Why? Because there are sensors in the part of the refrigerator where the milk is, so as the weight of that milk becomes light enough, it will trigger an order. We have music systems that are hooked up to the internet. We almost have every device, smart TVs, smart stereos, iPhones, smart refrigerators. We even have thermostats which regulate through the internet. So this all relates to the Internet of Things. And they remain a major point of weakness, because when was the last time you downloaded virus protection software to your smart refrigerator? Now, many of us don't have a smart refrigerator yet, but from my experience with my peers that do have a smart refrigerator, they give practically no thought to downloading any type of virus protection for the device in the refrigerator that really connects to the internet. So this is a very big point of weakness. All too often, all these devices in the Internet of Things lack basic security figures, or they are not even properly configured, or they rely on default passwords that can give attackers easy access. Now, this in turn is giving rise to botnets. Now, botnets can be used for high-level attacks. They could extract stolen data and then further identify additional vulnerabilities, or even use brute force attacks, meaning that they will try almost every combination of passwords until they hit on the right one. So we need to properly secure the Internet of Things, or it will continue to be a big issue. I remember watching a TV magazine show that showed the Internet of Things, how it could be exploited in an automobile. And in this test, a hacker applied the brakes in a car over a mile away, right? Because most cars now are smart cars. Now, when we think about that, we have GPS and we're going towards driverless cars. Again, that's the Internet of Things. Imagine cybersecurity when it comes to having defenses so hackers cannot randomly apply the brakes or even change red lights to green lights on a traffic grid. So imagine hacking into a security system through your music system, through your car, through your refrigerator. So this is a big danger, and cybersecurity has to move from the computer and from the mobile phone to every device that basically is hooked up to the internet. And right now the internet is so ubiquitous, the next generation won't even ask, oh, is this hooked up to the internet? Because that is now the default. Let's talk about the cloud. Now, after decades of powering digital transformations to small and medium-sized businesses, cloud computing has quickly become a must-have enterprise technology. Gone are the days that a new company has to invest $500,000 in a server farm, in one of those rooms that's cooled to a chilly temperature where they keep all the servers, all the computers. Right now, we rent computer power from other third-party vendors. Now, the advantage of this for new businesses is almost zero, because a new business no longer has to hire an IT department and no longer has to buy a robust computer infrastructure. They just need an entry device. It could be a computer, it could be a mobile phone, and they can access cloud computing. Now, after a decade of this digital transformation that we just talked about, the impact is now global. Now, fewer than half of all enterprises currently use public cloud platform, but that will only increase because, again, not having to invest in those assets is becoming a competitive advantage in the asset-light economy. So in 2018, we'll cross the significant 50% adoption rate milestone, and now the majority of companies will use cloud computing, which includes applications, platforms, and services on the cloud. And this will continue to radically change the way enterprises compete for customers. Now, what is
so
some
Vincent,
of the... Yes.
I wanted to ask you about cybersecurity, some of the issues that you talk about, and the budgets that you sort of recommend organizations to sort of use as a guideline for investing in cybersecurity. But what are some ways that small and mid-sized organizations can cope with some of these cybersecurity issues in a cost-effective way?
Well, the companies that I work with, the small, medium-sized ones, use third-party vendors. So, for example, in one company that I work for, they constantly scan the computer real time for potential viruses. Now, the company itself does not have that infrastructure. We have a contract with a third-party vendor, and anytime there is a problem, they remote access the computer, and I don't even have to be there. Now, of course, you want people who you could trust. You want people possibly that are bonded. But the same way that cloud computing has obviated the need for companies to have their own server farms, well, cybersecurity is usually accomplished by small to medium-sized companies by partnering with the vendor that is all they do. Now, the reason why this makes sense, Vishal, is because cybersecurity is completely scalable. You know, if I come up with a program that could scan for malware, well, whether I run that program for one computer or a million computers, it's completely scalable. So the marginal cost of an additional customer is zero for the company because all of the development costs are in the front end when they develop the virus protection software. So because of that, small to medium-sized companies could usually sign a contract with a third-party vendor at a price that matches their budget. Does that make sense, Vishali? Vishali, you there?
Sorry, Vincent. I was on mute. Yes, that makes sense. Thank you.
No, very good. And again, keep the questions coming. Anyone in our audience, continue to type in questions if you have them. Now, continuing with cloud computing. Now, the growth in cloud services and solutions includes, software as service. So it's not just cloud computing for storage, but you can also use cloud computing for software. So what's an illustration of this? Back in the day, maybe 10, 15 years ago, if I was to get a new version of Microsoft Word, they would send me the CD-ROM and I would upload it on my computer. Or even when they got rid of CD-ROMs, on an individual computer by computer basis, I would log into my Windows Vault, and I would be given a link and I would download the software. Well, software as a service means that every time Microsoft Word, as an example, has a new version, it's simply transparently, seamlessly downloaded, because I don't exactly own that software, but I'm leasing it. The advantage of that is that it's constantly updated. And this also helps us with the previous issue we discussed in cybersecurity, because anytime that there's a bug or a flaw that's discovered, instead of waiting for the consumer of the software to manually update, the update happens automatically. So cloud computing software as service actually helps us with cybersecurity. Now, some statistics, according to PGMG, platform as a service adoption is predicted to be the fastest growing sector in cloud platforms. Now, it's going to grow from 32% in 2017 to a 56% adoption rate within 2 years by 2020. So platform as a service solutions provide a platform that allows customers to develop, launch, and manage apps in a way that's much simpler than having to build and maintain the infrastructure. And again, Vishali, this is scalable, and it reduces the barriers to entry for new businesses to almost zero. So it will also provide an environment where it will be even easier for startup companies to launch. Now, the Internet of Things, the Internet of Things we're going to talk about again. Most Internet of Things, and you might hear, Vishali, IoT, that's how it's referred to in the jargon. Most IoT devices, your jacket that contains a sensor, or perhaps I've seen now echocardiograms, which could be done on an iPhone, and the information is transmitted to your doctor. Most IoT devices rely on the cloud to work, especially with connected devices working together. So the Internet of Things, or IoT devices, or connected devices like household appliances, cars, electronics, they have a cloud-based backend as a means to communicate and store information. And the cloud that supports this is constantly being updated. So as you get a device, let's say right now when I look at telemedicine, there's a way to do a sonogram on a device, right? It could be an iPhone or it could be an Android device. And there's one project where they're trying to match pathologists in France with people that need pathologists in Haiti. This was a response after the earthquake. And this is another example of the Internet of Things, because someone trained on how to do a sonogram on a smart device could get that information to a doctor in Paris for diagnosis. And again, this is related to Internet cybersecurity, because if there's a new threat identified, that will be downloaded automatically. And now we have a pathologist in one part of the world working with a technician in another part of the world, transmitting that information through the internet. And all this is going to be done on cloud computing. The iPhone or point. Now, finally, in the cloud, let's talk about edge computing. Now, this is something that I've only become familiar with in the past couple of months myself. Now, edge computing is performing data processing at the edge of the internet to optimize cloud computations, and this will also be on the rise. Now, why is edge computing required? Well, it's a result of an increased usage of internet-connected devices, which is really requiring more and more processing power. Now, edge computing is necessary and will be on the rise in 2018 because it will be required to run real-time services as it streamlines the flow of traffic from IoT devices to provide real-time local data analysis and analytics. Now, just to give some examples of edge computing and what's the benefit, edge computing, again, performing data processing on the edge of the network, it enables analytics to be processed closer to the source of the data. So if you have a wind turbine engine, if you have a scanner, if you have any type of industrial machine, or let's look at undersea blowout preventers, right? Well, you want the processing to be done as close to those devices as possible, because especially when you have to do real-time analysis, it improves time to action for time-sensitive data. Now, a term that we use in big data is velocity of data, and velocity of data doesn't only refer to how quickly data is coming at us, but high velocity of data refers to how quickly must that data be analyzed before it becomes worthless, before it becomes obsolete. So we do want to increase the time to action. So instead of doing computations, let's say all the way in Paris by a pathologist there, we want to move as much of the processing as close as possible to the device as possible, because that will improve time to market in terms of analyzing real-time data. Now let's talk about artificial intelligence. It's certainly in the news. And just some background, it really wasn't long ago that artificial intelligence was reserved for the realm of science fiction. From mastering games of chess and Go to contemplating the meaning of life, now artificial intelligence has made major strides in 2017. A fully developed self-teaching artificial intelligence unit is no longer a dream. Recently, I think within the past couple of months, a machine taught itself to play the board game Go. But what was remarkable, it taught itself, it simply analyzed several million, I believe, previous games of Go from start to finish, and it picked up its own instructions on how to play the game. So unlike being fed instructions on how to play this board game, it simply reviewed previous versions of the game, and then it was able to figure out the rules itself. So this is the breakthrough in artificial intelligence, because artificial intelligence is based on deep learning. Now, deep learning is based on learning by data representations and not task-specific algorithms, right? So when you have deep learning, which is based on data representations, machines are able to learn themselves. When machines, quote unquote, learn through task-specific algorithms, well, it's pretty much limited to the program that you give it. And so deep learning through artificial intelligence programs has really made the biggest strides just in the past year. A fully developed AI system, well, it's no longer a dream. I have peers that have Amazon Echo, for example, and that's an example of artificial intelligence at its very nascent phase, at the beginning phase. The more you talk to your Amazon Echo, the more it will learn about you and the better answers it will give. So why is that an example of artificial intelligence? Because you don't have to program it differently to perform better. You simply have to interact with it more, and over time it will perform better. Because again, artificial intelligence is about deep learning, which is learning based on data representations. Now, data analytics, alongside artificial intelligence, big data has really been talked about so much in the past decade. Some say that it's the most overhyped and least understood terms of the past few years. But why businesses have been using data analytics, it's really going to be useful with artificial intelligence. I've used the example in previous webinars that algorithms eating big data has really made great strides in data analytics. Now, I want you to imagine artificial intelligence consuming big data. And then I want you to imagine algorithms, not written for classical computers, but algorithms written for quantum computers. Now, classical computers work by having zeros and ones. So you may have a supercomputer that can do 1 trillion calculations in a second, but it's still performing 1 trillion sequential calculations, 1 trillion calculations consecutively. But with quantum computing, taking advantage of quantum mechanics and superposition, where you could have a photon be both quote unquote on and off and both at the same time, well, a quantum computer could handle all of the calculations, get this, simultaneously. So we're talking artificial intelligence, eating big data. And by big data, I'm including the Internet of Things, digital exhaust, and now if we merge that with quantum computers, and right now Google is experimenting with a 16-qubit quantum computer. Now, I can give more information on how quantum computers work, but that is beyond the scope of today's webinar, but that is certainly something that is already being worked on. And once you have artificial intelligence now able to process real-time all of the data around us, easy passes going through bridges, all of the cameras around your cities, basically the GPS on everyone's iPhone. Here we're going to see tremendous breakthroughs in data analytics. And what's going to make artificial intelligence so ubiquitous is that people will no longer have to be experts or really even have to have any knowledge in coding to interact with artificial intelligence. Why? Because of something called natural language. One of the major challenges that has constantly plagued both AI and the world of computing in general is natural language use. Because without natural language, meaning just talking to a computer the way I'm talking to you now during this webinar, you had to know some basic coding to interact. But with natural language, all you have to do, like with an Amazon Echo, or like when you're using a voice-activated system when you call Amtrak, when you have a automated response system on the phone, it could be an Amtrak reservation or any type of customer service, you're just speaking as if you're speaking to another human being, meaning that you're using the same type of quote unquote natural language. So now every person will be able to interact with artificial intelligence without any prior training. This is going to make artificial intelligence ubiquitous. So computers accept instructions using very specific sets of commands and subtleties, but with natural language, even a child bereft of any education in computers whatsoever will be able to take advantage of the power of artificial intelligence.
Oh, Vincent,
Yes.
well, you showed how much artificial intelligence can do, and how that can be applied to things that they do within organizations, different jobs and things. So from a professional development perspective, what are some skills that we should all be looking to develop to ensure that we don't become obsolete?
Well, Vishali, when I take on clients for career coaching, this is, especially for my millennial clients, they have 25, 35 working years ahead of them. So I try to work by giving them skill sets that will be relevant in a post-artificial intelligent world. So right now, Vishali, what we're seeing is something called the commoditization of knowledge. Back in the day, quote unquote, smart people were hired because they had all of this knowledge. But I want you to remember a game, Vishali. Vishali, do you remember a game called Trivial Pursuit that came out in the 1980s? I don't know if...
Of course, yeah.
Okay. If you notice, Trivial Pursuit right now wouldn't be a fun game because everyone could look everything up on their iPhone. Right? Trivial Pursuit was only an interesting game in the 1980s because it was pre-internet and it tested people's knowledge. Back in the day, if someone were to hire you, they hired you because of your knowledge. But now we have something called the commoditization of knowledge, and everything can be looked up. So you no longer have to know things to be relevant to the economy. So why? Because artificial intelligence will be able to kick out all the answers. So your question is, well, what are some of the skills that we need? Well, how to observe, how to separate signal from noise, how to be creative, how to be intuitive, and the big value is in knowing what question to ask. We're no longer going to value human beings who can give answers because we can get that from artificial intelligence. But the value will be in knowing what question to ask. And also another skill, Vishali, is when to take calculated risks and when to go against the solution offered by data analytics. And this would include for any innovation, because innovation does not have any historical data points which artificial intelligence needs to offer its solution. So an illustration of that, Vishali, is that if Henry Ford, right, what to use, just as an illustration of Henry Ford, what to use artificial intelligence to find out what people wanted, the answer would be consumers want horses that require less water and can run faster on less food, right? Artificial intelligence would not have come up with the answer that what people want is a horse carriage that does not require a horse. So anything with innovation lacks historical data points, and artificial intelligence consuming big data absolutely requires historical data points to spit out solutions. So the skill that's going to be required is innovation, creativity, imagination, when to go against an AI offered solution, and knowing what questions to ask. And also what's going to be required is a lot of the soft skills. Now, hard skills like coding, well, you have master algorithms, which are algorithms that write other algorithms. So going into the future, you may not have to know as much coding because we have codes that can write other codes, but how do we interact with people? Let's look at ethics, Vishali. Right now, we need people who know how to build ethics into algorithms. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, if you look at drones, especially, unfortunately, combat drones have to make real-time decisions on when to be used and when not to be used. So we have people building ethics, and this was an article in The Economist about a year ago. We have people building ethics into algorithms so they know how to mirror human ethics when human interaction is no longer required. So that's another skill. Ethics is very important, and another skill that's going to be needed in a post-artificial intelligence world is when to know when to shut it down, right? So if an artificial intelligent unit commits a crime, who's responsible? Is it the company who purchased the unit? Is it the business, the person that developed the unit? Or more interestingly, is the unit itself? Now, we're still a long way off, from having a bot, being held as a legally recognized person, but these are the debates happening in think tanks right now. So human careers in knowing when to shut AI down because it's betraying our own ethical standards, that will also be needed. So in conclusion, the skills that are needed is intelligence, creativity, going against intuition, and being innovative.
Great, thank you. Thanks,
Okay.
Vincent.
Now let's talk about technology innovations. Let's talk about the digital classroom, right? Because it comes down to learning and development. The internet has exponentially increased our access to information. I talked about the knowledge now being a commodity. And we are now seeing a rise in massive open online courses. So, there were 58 million students enrolled in online courses last year alone. So these courses are becoming more and more interactive and project-based. They break the physical limitations of the traditional classroom and allow an educator to reach millions of students from around the world at minimal cost. It is completely scalable. Individuals now from developing countries can now access and enroll in courses being offered globally. So if you're in one part of the world and you want to attend a massive online course in Stanford, you can do that. It's scalable, and physical location is now superfluous. So today's innovative teaching methods involve blended learning, which includes a mix of classroom learning and online learning. So for instance, students will watch an online instructional video at home, while classroom time is focused on problem solving and collaborative activities. This is a technique that I use in the classroom. It's called the flip approach. When I first started teaching many years ago, I would lecture in the classroom and then assign homework to be done at home. Now I use a flip approach. The lecture is at home. I have a pre-recording of my lecture, a videotape of my lecture, so students attend the lecture at home, and then we do the homework in the classroom where they have access to me real time to help them with the problem solving. So this is made possible with the new technologies that we are talking about. So we talk about the digital classroom, and let's talk about now global online collaboration. We are seeing an increasing focus on global online collaboration where digital tools are used to support interactions around curricular objectives. And this absolutely promotes intercultural understandings. When I teach online, I might have a dozen more cultures and languages represented in the classroom. So as the rising billions arrive on the web, these people who were once marginalized are now going to bring their voices and ideas to the classroom. As they participate in online learning networks, they will contribute to something we call global empathy of our species, right? Because in order to have empathy, we need understanding. Let's talk about the future workforce. According to McKinsey, technology could automate 45% of the tasks people are currently paid to do. People talk about Uber obviating traditional taxi and limousine services. Well, what do you think the driverless car is going to do to the people who are currently driving for Uber? So McKinsey is talking about many tasks will be automated. When I go to my pharmacy, when I go into a CVS store, I used to see 5 cashiers. Now I might see one person manning 5 kiosks where customers check out themselves. So again, McKinsey is talking about the continued automation of tasks people currently do. So jobs are going to require higher order skills, such as, Vishali, what we mentioned before, to your great question, creativity, emotional intelligence, and analytical thinking. This will be more difficult to automate, and these type of skills will probably be required in an artificial intelligent world. So organizations, Vishali, have simply not kept pace with the changing nature of the workforce and the need for these new skills that are really in short supply. So how do we prepare professionals for this future? Well, there's something called the human economy, right? So let's go back 50, 100,000 years. We had the agrarian economy, right? That obviated the hunter food gatherer societies, right? So we had hunter food gathering economies, agrarian economies. Then we had the industrial economy, right? And then within 100 years, we had the service economy. Then we had the knowledge economy. But the problem with the knowledge economy is that knowledge has now become a commodity. So now we have the human economy. And that means that most value tends to now be created horizontally across the organization. And there's something called the Athena Project, and you can Google it. The Athena Project says that the world will be run by women and people who think like women, meaning that high emotional intelligence, collaboration has already replaced your traditional vertical command and control infrastructure of yesterday's economy. So when we look at the future workforce, we're looking at the human economy, we're looking at premises as advocated in the Athena Project as values created horizontally across the enterprise, and we're looking to help people increase their emotional intelligence. Now, Vishali, to have high emotional intelligence, you need high cultural empathy, and we just mentioned with the global online collaboration aspect of this talk, how global empathy will increase as more and more marginalized voices will join classrooms as online learning replaces traditional classroom learning. Now let's talk about virtual and augmented reality. This is something my editor would tell me. You know, my editor would look at my work and she would say, show me, don't tell me, right? What's an example of that? I might say, John Doe plays chess. My editor would say, no, don't tell me, show me. So I might describe a scene where the protagonist, John Doe, is carrying a chess set on his way to the park, right? Show me, don't tell me. Well, show me, don't tell me has always been a fundamental principle in effective teaching, and virtual and augmented reality are really offering revolutions in this learning experience. One of the biggest feats of these technologies is that they make the learning experience more engaging or inspiring and highly transformational. They are immersive experiences that have the potential to contribute faster with a quicker time to market to skill acquisition. They offer better retention and improved decision making. Why? Because it's a safe environment. You know, the ultimate augmented reality might be flight simulation that we touched upon in last month's webinar. And now we're talking about gamification, where students basically learn through gamification by keeping score and benchmarking their results with their peers and their own historical data points. And what makes virtual and augmented reality highly immersive is that you're able to test edge conditions of whatever discipline you're learning in a safe environment. And by augmented reality, we're talking about taking your current reality and being able to learn in extreme conditions that are only virtual, so they're still safe. And if you can handle extreme conditions, you will probably exceed very well in the 80% under the bell curve conditions that you will experience in your day-to-day non-virtual world. And then finally, big data and artificial intelligence. We touched on it before. Data can be used to improve student results, assess each student's strengths and weaknesses, and create mass customized courses. How? Let's say we do a massive online course and we have 20,000 students a month taking it, and we have these self-exams. Well, if we find that the majority of students are weak in one area, the course will automatically update itself to offer better learning examples for the areas that students showed weakness in. So this is how algorithms come into play, and they will analyze student data points on a massive scale to constantly make the programs more flexible and adapt to almost real-time feedback. So remember that big data has to do with unstructured data as well. So it could also analyze questions that students ask using natural language, even if they're interacting with a human instructor across the internet, speaking to them, asking them a question in the same way I'm speaking to you. So big data could also analyze vocal speech and continuously update the object lessons of the course based on the questions students ask the professor, again, just using natural language. So you can see how everything comes together. So now let's talk about how technology innovations can enable these transformations we've talked about. Now, training not only makes employees better at their skills, but it motivates them to perform their tasks better. It boosts morale, it builds elements of responsibility because they feel that they're being trusted, they feel that they're being invested in, and with blended learning, the employee experiences more flexibility to his or her individual needs. It offers personalized training sessions, right? We're in the era of mass customization. So blended learning can also offer personalized training sessions with simulations and VR, virtual reality classes. This will help students learn and assimilate even better to complex environments. Now remember, personalization will also help employers prepare better for the real-time scenarios that employers must engage their employees in. So blended learning is something also offered by Netcom Learning. Now, blended learning provides the best of all types of training to the corporate world. It is definitely the right option for organizations to adopt because it lets the employees explore the possibilities that technology can offer. It encourages their creativity. And we mentioned before, Vishali, that one of the skills that employers need to hire is creativity. So this type of learning will allow employers to explore their own possibilities with technology. It will encourage their creativity, and both employees and employers will benefit from these proven methods of learning. So what organizations need to do next, Vishali, is to find the right training partner to provide for these exclusive benefits of blended learning. So this is where we bring it back to Netcom Learning. We believe in these ideas. We just spent the last 20 minutes discussing them with you. And with more than 20 years experience in the field of corporate training and over 2,500 courses provided to both individual and corporate clients, Netcom Learning is the right choice for blended learning partners that want to work with your organizations. Netcom Learning has always been a pioneer in adopting the most modern technologies for corporate training, including personalized simulations and online training. The experts at Netcom Learning in artificial intelligence and virtual reality creates the most effective training sessions that can be specifically scaled to your organization. Netcom Learning works with your employees to help them align their training needs with your organizational goals. Netcom Learning is results oriented. They have a proven track record of using blended training methods to create strong leaders who excel in the professional areas of expertise. So I'm inviting everyone attending today's webinar. If you like what you heard so far, I invite you to contact Netcom Learning or look at their website and see how Netcom Learning could synergize with you. Again, the results oriented, so Netcom Learning only feels that they do a good job if you have results. And by results, you know me, I'm a big believer in the ultimate lagging indicator. What result is that? Net income, profit, earning per share. These are the metrics that shareholders care about. These are the results that Netcom Learning cares about. So I invite you to contact them today to learn more, or even to offer your feedback to them. So Vishali, I'm going to wrap it up, just talking about some of the key takeaways, and then I'm going to toss it back to you. So the key takeaways, we talked about how the cloud tops the list of top technology trends to dominate IT in the future. This is completely scalable. It reduces barriers to entry for new companies to almost zero because they simply could harness mass computing power from a device without having to invest in the assets themselves. Again, we're talking about an asset-light economy. Next, we also talked about enterprises and how they will introduce more rigorous cybersecurity procedures, both to hinder external threats and negate the risk of insider threats, meaning employees that perhaps want to sabotage the organization. Thirdly, we talked about artificial intelligence and machine learning and how that will completely revolutionize the way we interact with big data. Think of algorithms eating big data. Think of master algorithms writing other algorithms without human interaction, and artificial intelligence, which is deep learning, being able to teach itself. Fourthly, we touched upon the 5 technology trends in the classroom, the digital classroom. We talked about the future of the workforce. We talked about virtual and augmented reality and how that creates a safe learning environment where employees can test edge conditions and really respond to virtual customers before they have to risk the presentation with a real customer. And then we concluded the 5 technology classroom innovation trends by talking about big data and artificial intelligence and how that will get into mass customization of the classroom and how algorithms can constantly update the content offered in the virtual classroom. And then to bring it back home, we talked about Netcom Learning can help you in deciding which of these learning technologies you can best leverage in 2018. And Netcom Learning can help you structure a smarter workforce to drive change, to do what, Vishali? Hopefully, because we want to lead to better profitability. So Vishali, that's it for me. I will toss it back to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Vincent. That was very, very informative. I am going to go ahead and pass it over to Gaurav Bansal, who is the Global Operations and Strategic Marketing Head at Starter Learning, to talk a little bit more about what Starter Learning is and what it has to offer.
Great. Inviting. And Vincent, thank you so much for great insights in the presentation. Definitely helps and gives us more clarity on these subjects, which are talk of the town, but nobody knows exactly what's the future and how to implement them. Now, having said that, Netcom Learning also has another business training practice, which is more focused on the soft skills, leadership, management, strategy, innovation aspect. So if you want to grow up in your career, if you want to get into the hierarchy, go up in the hierarchy ladder, it makes a lot of sense for you to also focus on the leadership and management programs and upskill yourself in these areas. Now, Starter Learning consists of micro-learning programs. We have approximately 200 plus such programs across different categories. And there is a special offer right now going on. So if you log on to the platform, browse through the courses, and see if you choose to take away some of the courses, you can definitely apply SL Welcome 35 and you get a straight 35% discount as a first time user. So we all welcome you. Thank you so much for attending the webinar and hope to see you at starterlearning.com. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. And we're going to go ahead and launch a quick poll to find out how many people are actually interested in picking up some additional training. So if Ben, Gaurav, you can go ahead and launch that poll, that would be great. And we'll go ahead and take any questions that anybody has. So please feel free to type in your questions, and we'll get to those in just a minute. Vincent, one question for you. I know you talked a little bit about the workforce, organization workforce becoming largely global, very technology driven. You know, a lot more organizations are allowing people to work from anywhere, only because sometimes they have to. Sometimes there's not a need for that physical location to add to cost. But on the flip side, there are organizations like IBM, for example, who have been embracing remote work for many, many years, who are now asking workers to actually pull back and have sort of discontinued the ability to work remotely and have asked people to come into the office. So tell us what's going on and what are some strategies for an organization and for leaders to actually make the whole remote working thing possible?
Sure. Well, much respect to IBM. Just a little history. IBM in the 1950s and 60s successfully convinced banks not to keep records on physical pieces of paper, but to keep it on these tapes. I want you to consider how hard of a hurdle that was to convince banks to keep all these records on quote-unquote invisible tapes instead of green ledger paper. And that just shows that IBM was the leading technology company in the 1960s. But why is IBM really discouraging remote working? Well, much respect to IBM, it's a marquee company, but I almost feel, Vishali, it could be the same way that millennials are more comfortable with technology than, let's say, a baby boomer or a mature person. You know, companies like Google and Facebook, they don't really know any other way. So I think that they did not really have to adapt from the traditional work environment to mobile environment because they grew up in that environment. But IBM definitely had to make tactical changes to its culture. So I feel that traditional organizations that have to make the change will not always be as successful as companies, Vishali, that simply never knew any other way, but you know, the working at home or being physically at an office is superfluous. I will tell you that IBM is a more traditional organization than let's say a Google and a Facebook, and I will say that collaboration is improved when there's a combination of virtual and face-to-face interaction. Okay, so one reason why IBM could possibly be doing that is that if people are only working virtually and they never meet face-to-face, well, you know, cultural faux pas, for example, are not easily forgiven when you've never met the person. Now, you and I, Vishali, we've met face-to-face in Netcom Learning, and so even though that we work virtually, we already have somewhat of a rapport, and so it kind of enhances our virtual working. So it could be that IBM felt that the pendulum swang too much the other way, but I will tell you, Vishali, if you want not having to physically come to the office work, you need good metrics, right? You need to measure people on end results, because if you're going to measure people on team building and how hard they worked, right? People working at home doesn't work. So to answer your question, working at home really works best when you give employees a very clear, measurable goal, as opposed to measuring them on, you know, attitude and team building and things like that. So in conclusion, I think IBM felt the pendulum swang too far the other way because it is changing its culture, unlike a new tech firm that simply knew no other way.
Yeah, that's a great perspective, actually, Vincent, and thank you so much for sharing that with us. And you know, we're starting to come close to the end of our webinar. So I just wanted to let everyone know that we have a lot more informative webinars that are coming up, and please go to netcomlearning.com/webinars to register and to find out more. Also, please follow our social media pages to get the latest technology updates. You can refer to the GoToWebinar chat window for the links. And again, thank you to everyone for joining us today. If you do come up with any additional questions, feel free to send them to webinar@netcomlearning.com at any time. And we hope you found today's webinar informative, and we look forward to seeing you back here with us soon. And feel free to tell your friends and colleagues about our webinars and other courses. And everyone, have a wonderful day. Thank you.